Welcome to Occult Archives, where we uncover the mysteries and myths and legends behind, well, history's most feared books.
From mystical grimoires to ancient religious texts, these secrets, well, they say they were too dangerous to be read.
Episode 185,
For who?
A Templar Monitor and the Path of Sacred Chivalry by George Cooper Conner.
By George Cooper Conner, yeah.
You've sent us George Cooper Conner's Shibboleth, a Templar Monitor.
Right.
And just flipping through it, you get the sense that this isn't just some dry historical account.
Yeah.
It's like a working guide to the rituals and the structure of the Knights Templar, especially as they were practicing in the late 19th century United States. So we're going to kind of unpack what this monitor is all about and pull out some of the most intriguing aspects for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that Shibboleth is a really fascinating text to look at for this, right?
Yeah.
Because it really is, like you said, not just a history, but it's like a window into the beliefs and the ceremonies, even like the social lives, right?
Yeah.
Of Templars of that era.
Yeah.
And so we'll kind of help you navigate the contents and understand what stood out to us as, most significant.
So think of this as your own personal guided tour through the pages of Shibboleth.
That's right.
We'll look at the structure of the book itself, then delve into some of the key rituals and the historical context that Conner provides. Really, our mission here is to give you the essential insights without getting bogged down in every detail, every little thing.
Exactly.
So where do we even begin with this fascinating document?
Well, I think a logical place to start is with the book itself, right?
Good.
So it was published in 1894 by George Cooper Conner, and it's explicitly intended as a monitor for the Order of the Temple, which is another name for the Knights Templar. And this term monitor, I think, is really key here. Essentially, these monitors served as handbooks within fraternal organizations, and they didn't just outline, rituals, but also they reinforced the order's history, values, and, even proper conduct for meetings and ceremonies.
That makes sense. So it's not just a history book. It's like a how-to guide, I guess, for being a Templar in that era.
Exactly.
And, right off the bat, we see this dedication to Sir John P.S. Gobin, where Conner mentions their long acquaintance and his own indebtedness to Gobin.
Yeah.
And it suggests there was a real personal connection there.
Yeah.
Why might that be significant, do you think?
Well, these dedications often tell us a lot about, the author's position and the social dynamics within the organization.
Yeah.
So, Conner's indebtedness to Gobin could indicate mentorship, maybe a significant influence on Conner's own, Templar journey, or perhaps even, Gobin's, high standing within the order lending authority to Conner's work.
Right.
It gives you a little hint at the kind of the internal networks and hierarchies that are at play.
Interesting, yeah. And then we get to the preface to the 5th edition, which mentions kind of an unexpected early demand for the book. So that tells you that it filled a need, clearly, within the Templar community.
Absolutely.
And he goes on to talk about adding new material, including a third appendix, to make it even more comprehensive.
Yeah.
What do you think that suggests?
Well, I think the rapid demand shows us that this book was considered a valuable resource and maybe even an essential resource for Templars of that time. Conner's efforts to include more material, especially right before his passing, as noted in the note by the publishers, really underscores his commitment to providing a definitive guide for the order. It's like he's trying to codify and preserve their practices.
So what exactly did this quote-unquote complete monitor cover? Because it sounds like quite a range of topics.
It really does. It starts with monitorial instructions, which seem to be kind of general guidelines applicable across different aspects of Templar life. And then it gets into the specifics. It details the rituals and procedures for the various orders within their system. So you have the Illustrious Order, the Red Cross, the Order of the Temple itself, and the Order of Malta.
Gotcha. So you've got these 3 different branches, so to speak.
That's right.
And beyond those, individual orders, it also covers the practicalities of running their local groups, right?
That's right. So Conno includes detailed instructions for opening and closing their local chapters.
Okay.
So those are known as commanderies for the Knights Templar and priories for the Order of Malta.
Gotcha.
He even provides guidelines for burial services, which I think is interesting, right?
Yeah.
It really highlights the fraternal support network that extended even to, death.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about the rituals and the ceremonies. The appendices, those sound like they contained a lot of practical information as well.
Yeah, those appendices sound like they're pretty meaty.
Oh, yeah. Think of them as like essential reference materials.
Okay.
So there were calendars relevant to their specific dating system, which is Anno Ordinus.
Okay.
And then there's also lists of abbreviations they commonly use.
Gotcha.
Even musical scores for their fraternity songs and various standardized Templar forms for things like petitions and trial procedures. It really gives you a sense of well-organized and structured society.
Okay, let's dive into one of these orders. Let's talk about the illustrious Order of the Red Cross.
Sure.
Now, Conno seems pretty keen to emphasize its importance, stating that it's not just a mere social observance.
Yeah.
Why do you think he felt the need to kind of make that point?
Well, I think Conno's emphasis suggests that perhaps some members within the order were maybe viewing the Red Cross degree as less significant than the others.
Okay.
Maybe just as a preliminary step or a social gathering.
Right.
And by stressing the need for, proper paraphernalia, the Jewish and Persian robes, the specific turbans for specific officers.
Yeah.
He's really trying to re-emphasize the symbolic and ritualistic depth that is intended for this order.
He wants to make sure people are taking this seriously.
Exactly.
And this central idea of this order is truth, right?
Yeah.
How does the ritual itself kind of work to convey that?
Well, the ritual centers around the biblical story of Zerubbabel, Cyrus, and the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem.
Okay.
And it features a symbolic discussion, among Darius's guards about what is the strongest force in the world.
Okay.
And Zerubbabel actually argues for truth.
Right.
And ultimately, convinces Darius of its supreme power.
Okay.
So this narrative foundation, I think, connects the order to a respected, historical and religious context.
Yeah.
And it lends a lot of weight to this virtue of truth that they champion.
Yeah, so they're taking a story that most people, at least in this culture, would know.
Right.
And using that to sort of embody that idea of truth.
Exactly.
Which is itself abstract.
Yeah.
And there are visual symbols associated with this order as well, right?
Absolutely.
So you've got the banner of the order.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So the banner of the order is green with a 7-pointed star enclosing a red cross.
Okay.
And it has the motto, Magna est veritas et prevalevit, which means...
Great is truth and it will prevail. Yeah.
That's right.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it is. And, I imagine that this visual representation would have served as a constant reminder, right?
Yeah.
Of the order's core principle, during their meetings and ceremonies, just having that there visually.
Yeah, totally. And the cross of the order itself is also very symbolic.
Yeah, that's right. It's a red cross with the letters DTJL inscribed on its arms.
Okay.
And those stand for deity, truth, justice, and liberty.
Okay.
And so, these are presented as kind of interconnected virtues that underpin the order's philosophy.
And even the attire, the clothing for the companions of the Red Cross has significance.
Yes, absolutely. They were to wear dark clothing with a green sash.
Okay.
And the sash possibly displayed a red cross and along with a belt and sword. And so this prescribed dress, reinforced their identity as members of the order. It visually distinguished them during the rituals.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that, Conno even specifies that the fatigue uniform of a Knight Templar, their everyday attire, shouldn't be worn during Red Cross ceremonies.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So there's a separation there.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the Order of the Temple itself.
Right.
This seems to involve a much more extensive initiation process, a symbolic 7 years of preparation, beginning with an unarmed pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Now that sounds like a a pretty significant commitment, even symbolically.
It does, and it's designed to be a very profound and transformative experience.
Right.
These houses of the Templars that candidates symbolically pass through represent different stages of moral and ethical development.
Okay.
Conno highlights lessons in humility, charity, and valor. So it's very much focused on shaping the character of the initiate.
Yeah.
And these lessons draw heavily from the New Testament narrative, focusing on the betrayal of Judas, the events in Gethsemane, the crucifixion, and the resurrection.
Okay.
So that really grounds the order in Christian tradition.
Yeah.
It's very much tying it to these core stories.
So the whole progression of Christianity, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And the inclusion of ritualistic elements like the extinguishing and restoring of light.
Okay.
And the unique method of casting lots.
Okay.
Which Conno explicitly notes as specific to their order would have heightened the solemnity and the emotional impact of these lessons. So it wasn't just about, intellectual understanding. It was about, a deeply felt, almost experiential engagement with these core religious stories.
Okay.
And there's also the investiture with the spur, although it's mentioned as being optional.
Okay.
And just like the Red Cross, the Order of the Temple has its own distinctive banners.
Tell me about those.
Yeah, so they have two. The Grand Standard is blue.
Okay.
With a red passion cross.
Okay.
And it bears the very powerful motto, in hoc signo vinces, which means in this sign you will conquer, above.
Okay.
And then below that, the traditional Templar motto, non nobis domine, non nobis sed nomini tua da gloriam, which is not unto us, O Lord, not unto us, but to thy name give glory.
Okay.
So it's a really potent combination, I think, of faith and Templar identity.
And then there's the Busant, the black and white banner.
Yes, exactly.
So tell me about that one.
Yeah. The black upper half and the white lower half served as their battle flag.
Okay.
And Conno explains the symbolism as signifying that, they were to be fair and kind to the friends of Christ, but terrible and fearsome to his enemies.
Okay, so pretty straightforward there.
Yeah,
Either with us or against us kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a stark and powerful declaration, I guess, of their role as Christian warriors.
Absolutely.
Okay, so upon completing this preparation, the Sir Knight then receives a charge outlining their duties.
Right. Yeah.
What are some of the key aspects of that?
Well, the charge emphasizes their responsibility to protect the weary, the innocent, and to uphold the cause of Christian religion.
Okay.
It also stresses the importance of brotherly love.
Okay.
And maintaining moral conduct.
Okay.
So it really paints a picture of, the ideal Knight Templar as a protector of the vulnerable and as a virtuous member of the community.
Right.
So it's setting forth that ideal.
And Shibboleth also goes into a lot of detail about the rituals and ceremonies themselves.
It does.
The instructions, for example, for opening and closing.
Yeah.
Both the Council of the Red Cross and the Commandery of Knights Templar.
Yeah.
Are very specific.
Very specific.
Even including, particular prayers.
Yeah.
What do you make of that level of detail?
Well, I think this kind of meticulousness really underscores the highly structured and formal nature of their gatherings.
Okay.
So, these rituals weren't casual affairs.
Yeah.
They were carefully choreographed proceedings intended to reinforce, their shared values and to create this sense of order and tradition.
Okay.
So everything had its place,
Yeah. And Conno also provides a ritualistic commentary on certain key names and terms.
He does.
For example, like Jesus and Golgotha. What's the purpose of that, do you think?
Well, by explaining the Hebrew origins and the meaning of Jesus as Savior, and the significance of Golgotha as the place of a skull. Conno is really aiming to deepen, the understanding and reverence for these foundational elements of the Christian faith in the Templar context.
Okay, so he's kind of tying them back to their meaning,
right? Exactly.
in their original language as well.
That's right.
Okay. He also discusses the motto Marshal Hashbaz.
He does.
That's an interesting one.
It is.
What do you make of that?
So he interprets it as symbolizing a state of readiness for action.
Okay.
And this really aligns with, the historical image of the Knights Templar as a military order, always prepared to defend their faith.
Okay, yeah. And then the discussion around the what he calls the so-called vision of Constantine and the Templar use of the Passion Cross. I mean, that's kind of nuanced, isn't it?
It is. Conno acknowledges the historical debate surrounding Constantine's conversion, and he even points out, aspects of his life that were less than exemplary.
Right. Not exactly a saint.
Not exactly.
And he notes that while, the ancient Templars used the Passion Cross, the specific inscriptions that are often associated with Constantine's vision might not have been a part of their original tradition.
Right.
So it shows, I guess, a level of critical engagement with historical narratives.
Yeah.
Even those that are very central to Christian symbolism.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, he's not just kind of blindly accepting these traditions. He's engaging with them.
Yeah.
He's questioning them.
Yeah.
He's trying to get to the truth of, where they came from
Yeah.
and how they should be interpreted.
And he even takes the time to, describe the attire of the original medieval Templars.
Yeah. So the long white tunic adorned with a red cross.
Yeah.
The white mantle.
Yeah.
This connection to the visual identity of their, historical predecessors would have been crucial, I think, for establishing a sense of continuity and legitimacy for this 19th century, American order.
Hey, we're the real deal. We're going all the way back.
Exactly.
And the phrase, it is finished, or consummatum est in Latin, I guess, holds special significance for them as well.
It does. And Conno highlights it as a cherished phrase of the ancient Templars.
Okay.
A reference to Christ's final words on the cross. And he expresses disappointment that its use seems to have diminished in the modern American order.
Oh, okay.
And he even suggests it as a fitting companion to In Hoc Signo Vinces.
So, it shows, again, this concern for preserving what he sees as, important historical traditions.
Okay. And those appendices, man, they offer just a wealth of detail, don't they? Procedures for dedications, constitutions, installation. I mean, it's all there.
It's really remarkable, the level of detail.
Yeah.
For example, the procedures for dedicating and consecrating their meeting places, which are called asylums.
Yeah.
Or, formally establishing new commanderies. Demonstrate the importance they placed on proper protocol and ritual in all aspects of their organizational life.
Yeah.
And then the instructions for installing officers, down to the specific jewels associated with each role, further emphasizes this very structured approach.
Okay.
So again, everything had its place. And, there was a right way to do things.
And the specifications for the Templar uniform are incredibly precise. Yes, even details like the design of shoulder straps to denote different ranks within both the grand and subordinate commanderies.
Wow.
This visual hierarchy and uniformity were clearly very important aspects of their identity and their social structure.
Okay. The inclusion of a complete burial service, I think, is also quite telling.
It is. I think it speaks to, the strong fraternal bonds within the order.
Okay.
The detailed rites, the prayers, the responses, and then the symbolic use of the sword and the cross in the context of, death and remembrance, highlight their commitment to supporting their members through all of life's stages, even in, bereavement. So they were there for each other, literally from cradle to grave.
Then we have the Order of Malta, or a Knight Hospitaller, which seems to have its own distinct rituals.
Yes, Conno provides a separate ritual for opening a priory, which is the local chapter for this order. And he draws a direct connection to the biblical account of Paul's shipwreck and subsequent stay on the island of Melita, which is now known as Malta.
Okay.
So, again, he's he's linking their traditions to early Christian history.
Okay.
And the vow taken by the Knights Hospitaller would have set them apart within this, broader Templar framework.
So how is that vow different?
Well, this specific vow would have emphasized their historical connection to the original Knights Hospitaller and their traditional mission of caring for the sick and pilgrims.
Okay.
So, it gives them a distinct focus, I think, within the overall Templar system.
Okay. And the idea of a single hall serving as this kind of like symbolic journey through Cyprus, Rhodes, and Malta for their ceremonies is really quite imaginative.
It's really fascinating, yeah. It's a clever way to integrate these key historical locations that are associated with, the Knights Hospitaller into their ritual space.
Okay.
And it allows members to symbolically connect with that history and to meditate on the life of Christ through that lens, even within, a single physical setting.
Okay. And beyond, those specific orders in the rituals, the appendices offer even like broader insights into Templar life.
They do. Things like their unique calendar system, which is based on, the founding of the medieval Knights Templar.
Yeah.
Even like a list of the name of God in various languages, popular abbreviations that they might have used, and explanations of, less common terms, all kind of contribute to the sense of like shared knowledge and identity within the order. Okay. And then the inclusion of fraternity music and like standardized forms for various organizational needs.
Okay.
That further illustrates the practical aspects of their fraternal life.
Okay. There are even quote unquote hints to eminent commanders on how to effectively manage their commanderies.
Yeah, that's right.
So what do those hints entail?
Well, these are practical tips, and they cover everything from like proper uniform etiquette to the importance of maintaining solemnity during rituals.
Okay.
So, they offer a glimpse into the leadership expectations and the values that they sought to uphold within their local chapters.
Okay.
And then, the rules of order for conclaves provides a framework for conducting their meetings in a structured and respectful manner.
Okay.
So again, it's all about like, order, decorum.
And it seems that religious observance kind of extended beyond just like the specific order rituals as well.
Absolutely. The inclusion of a form of divine worship for, various Christian holidays and occasions like Ascension Day demonstrates the integration of, their faith